Hey, Child Development 205, Chapter 6, Learning Disabilities this evening. So welcome. I'm really excited to talk about this topic. I think learning disabilities is one of those, it's closer to the front of the book because it is the highest incidence category, right? Last week we talked about speech and language. And when kids start to get older and they start to go into an academic setting, then you're going to start to see some challenges in the learning and expression. And so this is very common for people to know the phrase learning disability, but inside that IDEA category, it's pretty nebulous. There's a lot of different things and it does manifest in different ways. And so if you are working with little ones, you might not see any of this inclination show up at all. You're not there yet. You're not holding a pencil. Some little things like letter recognition, certain sorts of again, Professor Fernandez has talk a little bit more about like what you do in terms of like pre reading at this stage. But I know that when I was little, it was like hammering down the ABCs, but now it's more like, what's the first letter? Point to the first letter of your name. Right. And so a little bit recognition that gets a little bit more formative and personal. So how do you address, like, I would say literacy readiness?
Phonemes. We really go straight to the phonemes now. I mean, letter identification and symbol identification are what we've seen is with the rise in autism, they love that. And so they are hyperlexic to the symbols. Yeah. What is a little bit more nuanced is the phonemes. So we want to cue into the phonemes that each letter has a sound, the symbol equals the sound. But it, like Dr. or Professor Laney was saying, it is, we see the precursors to what the future will have. And so when they are not recognizing letters or when they are not making inferences, like Jack picked up his pumpkin and carved a face. And then I asked, like, what did Jack do? And if he can't answer, carved a face. If we don't get to that next step, we're going to see in the future a possible learning disability.
Right. It's the connection to the words, the language, and the meanings.
So that's why early intervention spends so much time on, in themes. You take your language arts and you just roll it out. And we talk a lot about understanding and receptive understanding and cognitive and play. Well, it's because these things are then related in the future to your academic skills. Right. So when they go sit at a test, they can figure out what the teacher's asking in written format. And so that's really yes, that's exactly what it is.
Excellent. And can I ask you, do you see, because I know for me in my experiences is that there's behaviors wrapped around readiness. And do you see some kids like more eager than others and some kids like shy away from some of the activities? You see
Absolutely. Yes. If it's not easy, it's the same for you. I mean, I'll shy away from running 3 miles. If it's not easy for me, I'm not going to go do it. If it's not easy for me to sit and attend to these letters that sometimes it says and sometimes it says a, and sometimes it says wa, like, I don't like, this doesn't make any sense. So no, those are the ones you're going to hone in on that need a bit of reading support versus your at 2 years old, he's saying cat. And then he says gate and gat. And you're like, how do you know that sometimes you say and they're decoding so fast, they're faster than I ever taught them. Right. No LD there, none whatsoever. But if you asked him who carved the pumpkin, I don't know that he would say Jack.
Right. So the voracious, like eager learners, you can see a mile away. And the ones that are like, all of a sudden I have a headache and a stomach ache and I need to go potty and I'd rather play some more. And I'm going to push you and throw something at you when it's time to sit and do that.
Yes, those are all escape behaviors. What are you trying to escape?
So again, in a non-academic setting or a pre-academic setting, you're going to see things around the learning, not so much that have you ever like suggested or try to categorize a child before in preschool with a learning disability? I mean, is it no, because you're not sure.
No, and if somebody were to come to me and say that, I would say that's premature.
Yeah,
it would take
developmentally appropriate to go there. It's basically speech and others at that point. Yeah.
I would still be working on receptive language. I'd still be working on
Yeah.
expressive language. I'd still be working on processing. Exactly.
Yeah. And I do have to say, like, in a casual way, I've heard people use the phrase learning disability, or I totally like, I'm so dyslexic, like in a casual way, and it's hard because, like, I don't want to be like the correction police or whatever, but like, I know that our society sometimes like casualizes words. And so every once, or like you hear people say, like later we'll talk about emotional issues, and people will be like, oh yeah, that person's totally psycho, or I'm so bipolar today. It's like there's certain language, there's certain phrases that we just need to be aware of, that like, maybe a certain day that your brain's just like a little bit jumbled, you're not dyslexic. And so I just encourage people, when you're learning about these things, just be aware of the terms that you're saying, and in which company that you're saying them, because here's the bottom line: the learning disabilities are 100% invisible.
Right.
They're invisible, so you don't know if what you're saying can be offensive, right? It would you would
And they're invisible with a cognitively and like completely intact human who understands you don't understand, who has friends who can be cool and the best sports player and has everything to lose,
right.
everything on a social level.
Right. It's kind of an interesting thing, because it's almost like like a hidden in plain sight secret in a way. I mean, if you've ever felt self-conscious about anything about yourself, whether it's like your nose or your ears, I have a friend who has a widow's peak, and she's just mortified about it her whole life. I'm like, we're like old now. We can get over those things, right? She's like, nope, I'm gonna have bangs here forever. Right? And I'm like, okay, that's fine. If you've ever felt self-conscious about anything about yourself, there are people, even in your bubble, in your circle, in your classroom, on your team, in your church or whatever, who are struggling with these things, but they aren't very vocal about it. I think society's getting a little bit more comfortable in people being vocal about it. But even if I was to say I'm dyslexic, it could mean 1,000 different things.
I think as teachers too, I know like I think as teachers, we have to be super, super careful.
Yeah.
I think we start to label kids like they can't do it, they won't do it, they're not capable. They tell their parents they need more time. You're not making them study enough. You need to do this and that. We need to be. It's just like somebody who's losing a ton of weight. All of a sudden, it isn't because they're not eating. Why aren't they eating?
Right.
So I think we need to start to eliminate everything before we start putting it onto the child.
Yes.
Yeah, in a very non-confrontational way. Don't do it walking by their desk and be like, why didn't you get that right, Johnny? You got a D on this test. I think that because teachers are the ones identifying this. So I would say this to Molly, like, these are the kids you're looking at. And so to be sensitive to that, that's where this starts, is in the classroom.
Right. And it's weird. I think we can, and by the way, students, I mean, younger grades, they really, really do look up to their teachers. There's a point where that doesn't happen anymore, but like little ones like are just enamored with teachers, and for the first few grades. So every time a teacher says something, they really take it to heart. So yay, CC's here. So we're just getting started with learning disabilities, and we're just talking about the general sense of learning disabilities and how common they are, and how we need to be sensitive in our language and our treatment. And I tell you, like, I remember being a kid, and just, if your teacher said you did a good job, wow, you did a good job. And if your teacher said you did something bad, then wow, you did really something bad. And so our words as teachers and staff and faculty and support roles and everything, our words make a huge difference. Kids take those in, they believe what you say. And it could be like, maybe you're having an off day and you make a sideways comment. Yeah, they are gonna.
I all the time think of the little boys that are class clowns or troublemakers. Like, I always want to say, did the chicken or the egg come first? Like, are they just fulfilling what they've heard their teachers say, or are they, so, and that all came from teachers. It all came from teachers.
Yeah, there's not one child who wakes up at 2 and says, I really would enjoy the role of class clown and see if I can irritate these women today, or these men and women today. There's not a child on the way. And that's another like cultural aspect for all identifiable challenges, or even unidentifiable challenges. little kids, especially the little kids, they want to do well. This is a weird concept for me because I thought as a teenager, I was like, I could pick and choose. Like today, I don't want to do so good. I'm just going to like not talk to anybody and I'm just going to roll my eyes at everything and I'm just going to say no to everything. And I, as a teenager, I could do that, right? With consequences. But little ones, they want a pat on the back. They want a thumbs up. They want an atta girl, atta boy. They want a wink. They want a smile. They want to hear their name called from you. They want to smile from you. They want to be on the good list. They want to be just, they want to have an easy day. They want to have an easy life. They want to have fun. And that was something I had to kind of relearn. I thought, oh no, people choose to have a good, no, little ones, they don't have the cognizance to wake up and choose other than a fun, easy day. They just want to they want to do well. They just want to do well. And so as providers, if we're thinking, no, little Johnny or little Sarah woke up just to, piss me off today, that's on you as the adult. Yeah. And I've seen it happen in many different ways and different roles and different days of the week and different years. And it's like, do you really honestly think this 4-year-old is crafting their responses to you like they did that on purpose? Do you think they have that much control over their brain? No, no. So there's this piece where I really hope that as we go forward as leaders and adults in our field is that we do make a huge difference. And like almost every little thing that we say makes a huge difference. I know for a fact, for me personally, my son is very cued into people's, he's the opposite of like sometimes he doesn't get facial expressions, but the microaggressions and micro expressions he will get. Like he will literally say, your eyes started twinkling. Like he will pick up on that. And like everyone's like, what? Like, or he'll say, oh, I know that you don't like tomatoes because you pulled those out of your taco 3 times in a row. So he's like the kid picking up into stuff. So especially when a teacher goes like he would have a behavior and a teacher would go like this. Like, I have never seen a child ever do something like that before. Oh man, do you think his behaviors got worse? Did they go up or did they go down?
They increased.
They 100% increased because that was almost like giving him a round of applause. Whatever you did, great job.
A fighter or something. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He's like, woohoo. And he like digs down. And that's the same teacher was like, well, he did it on purpose. Yeah, he also responded to the attention you gave him.
Right.
So there's a lot of pieces of these puzzles. And again, learning disability is an invisible disability. And sad to say, as we get through the chapter, it's almost like it's a very pervasive disability, but it's almost not disabling enough in a lot of respects. Because you can't get, like if you're older, you can't get unemployment for some of theirs or Social Security or SSDI just on a learning disability.
Well, even in the college format, you're limited. I mean, the chapters talked about that. After college, you can go in and try to get some support, but IDEA doesn't support you anymore as it's only through high school. So you're really only working off of a 504.
Yeah.
And so you're limited. So I mean, not even to a job, not even to anything like that. I mean, just straight even to college.
Right. And so they start to bring up these terms that kind of help us identify so again, when we talked in chapter 3 about the multi-tiered systems of support, the MTSS, and looking at the intervention levels that we do, there's phrases that come out of those interventions. And number 1 is unexpected underachievement. If you've ever had on your report card or a friend's report card or somebody's report card that says, not working to potential, that's a nice way of saying that. But with the little people, like the younger ones, let's say you have a first grader and they have a great attitude about school. They have friends, they're socially adjusted, they're healthy. They don't need glasses. They don't need hearing aids. They're, just right in the pocket of an average developed child. But they cannot manage whatever the task is. Maybe it's reading, maybe it's writing, maybe it's understanding, and whatever it is. And we're just all, if more than one adult is scratching their head about it, like, why is little Johnny and little Sarah not, like she sits with a book and he sits still during, circle time, and he seems to be engaged. If there's an unexpected underachievement, they're just not doing well given every other support or every other circumstance, that's your kind of your clue. And again, these things don't really clearly show up, I would say, to what? K and 1. Like in pre, you might have an idea of some of these things might show
Right.
up, but
Right.
in K and 1, you're going to start saying like, this might be a thing, right? So unexpected underachievement, that's a big term, right? And then also, then at that point, they go, okay, well, the student is, let's say they're doing well in every other subject except for math is like 1 or 2 grades below. But let's say they're getting all A's and like a D. You're like, that seems out of the norm for that child, right? And again, you can isolate a bunch of variables. Is that teacher extra hard? Is, did that child get placed in the wrong class? Were they sick and they missed a bunch of that particular period? Did they, things like that. If you can't figure it out and there's still this huge underachievement piece, there's something else to look at, and it's most likely a learning disability. Because what does a learning disability look like on the outside?
You and me.
There's no phenotype for it. There's no genetic marker for it. There's no socioeconomic status that said like these people have more of it and these people have, you have money, so then you don't have a learning disability. Oh yeah, absolutely. There's videos in our module that talk about high level brain surgeons with LD. How about
Charles Schwab?
Well, I said again.
Charles Schwab was in
Charles, I have money with that guy.
And his son. Yeah.
How about Steven Spielberg?
Yes, Cher, Johnny Depp,
Whoopi Goldberg. All right. So again, with all these, the rest of the chapters for the rest of the book, when we talk about one specific challenge, like category or silo, I guess you want to say it, there's different definitions. And I do like it, honestly, when there's more than one definition. To me, showing me that there's more than one person defining this issue means that there's more cooks in the kitchen in a good way. So again, I don't necessarily, so this is how IDEA, remember, will define it so they can fund it, right? But they're not necessarily the expert on it, right? So then you'll see other things like National Institutes of Health and the APA, American Psychiatric Association. So the APA would actually really like puts this in their diagnostical statistical manual of the mental disorders, but as more of, again, under the learning disability category. It's nothing, has nothing to do with mental health, but a group of these challenges can cause stress and anxiety and things like that. So it is acknowledged in a medical realm as well too, even though if your hand is working perfectly and your mechanics are working perfectly and your brain's working perfectly and there's just a gap, it's still a set of challenges here. And so I like the breakdown here: inaccurate or slow or an effortful word reading. Now, when little ones are learning, yeah, it's going to be slow, which is fine. But as they get older and they're not upping their speed, that's something to consider. Difficulty understanding the meaning of what is read. Oy, that's interesting too, because that will crisscross over in language development too. Typically, the bilingual brain is stronger because, again, if I have one image, I have one item, and I know 2 or 3 different words to describe the item. Jay's here, yay! Then my brain can switch between, hey, Jay's here. So if my brain can switch between pluma, pen, and bolígrafo, right, then that means I have 3 different neural pathways for one item, which means 3 times as strong. However, sometimes it takes a little bit longer to switch those things out. So again, we were talking before the class started about kids who are kind of straddling languages. When they get older, when you see like a 3rd grader still trying to code switch and pick languages and they're unsure and they're not talking, that's an issue. That's an issue, right? And I can't even imagine having a learning disability with both languages. Oy, that would be a whole, wow. And this is part of the, there's a carve out here with speech and language pathologists who do specific treatments with LD. And then there's also school psychs and ed psychs who do work with just learning disabilities. And there's schools just for this now too, which is great. Difficulties with spelling, difficulties with written expression, difficulties mastering number sense, facts or calculation, difficulties with mathematical reasoning. And I can tell you, as a college professor, I've had more students come through my classes with something that could look like a specific learning disability to do with math, or what we would call dyscalculia. And a lot of students come to our classes and go, well, I just want to work with preschoolers because I'm not good at math. Have you ever maybe been identified with like a math learning disability? Oh no, my third grade teacher just told me I was terrible at math and I would never be good at math.
There's that teacher again.
And here you are, like, 15 years later, believing that one teacher who had a bad day. And you were 8 years old and not catching it the first time around. So what? But there are some people who really do have a learning disability with math and have never maybe gotten some help or support or asked DSPS for an assessment or anything like that. And then I can see it in colleges where somebody says, I took the lowest math and I failed it twice or 3 times. And so I had to change colleges. I had to change districts. I failed it 3 times at Fullerton and I failed it two more times at Irvine. And I was so embarrassed I came here. That is a huge red flag. And that didn't just show up. So I'm hoping that even as you guys hear this as college students, please, 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 if you're not sure, reach out to one or both of us. This is where I do get, when I was reading the definition, this is where I kind of giggle because when I was in college, I was diagnosed with a learning disability and mine is very mild and it's also attributed to a head injury. So I'm okay. All those things there, I can have some of that, but mine's also connected to if I'm stressed or if I'm tired or for whatever reason. So mine is called dysgraphia, technically, because I can read things and I can tell you what I've read and I can tell you what it meant and I can tell you the author's meaning and the implications and things like that. But if you have me go rewrite something, see, I'm looking at these words 1 through 6 and all it says difficulty except for number 1. Like if you ask me right now to write the sentence for number 4, I could probably write that, but I would probably miss 2 or 3 letters just because I'm feeling like a little bit pressured. I know how to write. I just have this thing where my brain kind of takes a break in the middle of sentences. None of the words are moving. None of the letters are moving. When I go to write down a 4, sometimes it comes out as a 6. Sometimes when I go to write a 6, it comes out as a 2. So I just learned, and I just thought that everybody had that. And not until I was in college did I have a teacher identify. She's like, hey, so is English your first language? I was like, yeah. She's like, well, I noticed that when you're writing under like English classes, when you have to write an essay, you have these little symbols. And she's like, it just looked like you were writing Greek stuff. And I was like, oh no, that's my code for when I'm confused and I forgot a letter in the middle of a word that I need to go back and spell check. And I didn't have time. She's like, I think you need to go get that checked out. And so I just got like time and a half on a handwritten and I could have a distraction-free setting. Just having that, and I didn't even use it for everything. And it's better on the computer, by the way. So if I'm reading it on the computer and I'm typing on the computer, my typing is not super great, but it's faster and it's better. So that was a tool for like an accommodation for me. It's like, if I could, mind you, back in school, when I was in college, it was like word processors. It wasn't really, right. So even typewriters were helpful for me. But I also learned out another trick is that if I write in cursive, my accuracy increases. So it's just using a different part of my brain. But then I've also learned that as a college professor, when I write in cursive, not everybody was exposed to cursive writing. So a lot of people cannot read cursive writing. So if I know I'm feeling pressured, I will write in cursive, but I will stop and read everything that I wrote so people could understand what I wrote, even if they can't. So it's like this, it's
a lot of extra steps.
Yeah, it's a lot of extra steps, but it's almost like a Band-Aid. Like if you have a paper cut, well, you can leave it open and it could be kind of like yucky and oozy or whatever. Or you just put a tool on it, you put a Band-Aid on it. You might have to switch it or whatever, but that's how I just kind of been going through. And it wasn't until I think I was 20 years old. I was like, oh, I thought everybody's brain was like this. And then doing more research medically, I had multiple doctors tell me it had to do with a perinatal accident. I had like a head injury when I was being birthed. So
you think about all of these steps you go through you decided yourself to go through them so that you would learn the concept that was being taught to them. Not most students wouldn't, first of all, go through the steps, therefore not learning the concepts, and then the amount of time it takes. So like a teacher will say, you know, you need to do 20 minutes of math, or I need you to write these 10 sentences, where it takes me 10 minutes, it may take you 2 hours.
I always double every time that a professor says that.
Right. And so then your mom starts complaining that you're doing too much homework and you've only done the same amount. And then you go back to the teacher and you say she's doing the same amount. So you can see how this becomes really, the teacher is really the center point in all of this, and how she really needs to, it's not a time thing, and it's really
it's a quality issue.
Yes, it's a skill set, and the process of learning is as important as learning and
loving to learn. And that was a thing. I have to say, like, I never lost my love to learn. And I've seen kids who go into that learned helplessness mode, as in, I try really, really hard and I never really get there, so I'm just going to stop trying. That is heartbreaking to me. That actually breaks my heart even saying that. And it's this thing where I feel very blessed that even though I had all these little quirks and whatever with my brain, that I was a lover of learning, and I had a big enough mouth to advocate for myself. But I know a lot of kids don't, or culturally they're not allowed to speak up for themselves. And so I think, again, as adults, we have to be a little sleuthy about it. We have to be a little creative about, like, what are we seeing there? And if it scratches the back of your head, like, I wonder what that's all about. Like, and it's okay to accept a child and a person for who they are. Like, oh, that's just that child has that quirk. Yes, they might, but what is it attached to? Where did it come from? And is it creating more problems? Is it going to create more problems in the future? Or is it just something we need to love and embrace? There's a lot of questions around every little piece of that maintains that child who still loves to learn, even though they have issues, and as we go forward, that's the same concept I try to share with everybody, is like, no matter if you have a physical disability or seizure disorder or ADHD or autism, or you're gifted, like, even gifted kids can stop loving to learn. That's the ultimate tragedy. And so there's this piece where, again, as adults, as parents, as leaders, as teachers, as therapists, as providers, we need to have that, like, tell them, even if they have issues like this, even if they have learning disabilities, if they have a hard day, that it's still okay to keep going. It's the open mindset. It's the not yet. I haven't gotten it yet. And so I do tell people, I'm like learning disabilities are, and so here's another piece that's taught me over the years, is that fonts drive me crazy. Like, so I'm very clear about fonts. So this one, the white and the green is great. With the black background, I like the biggest contrast. Obviously, that's for accessibility. We want to make people comfortable who have, like, vision issues. But I've seen people use, like, 100 different fonts and, like, all these different colors and all this different, like putting it drives me crazy, because when stuff starts to get really fussy in what I'm looking at, then yes, my brain will start getting a lot more squirrely. And so, like, this to me is as clean and crisp as it can get.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I don't even use a whole lot of graphics, pictures. Every once in a while I will, but I keep things as clean as possible. And thank you, outwardly, thank you, Professor Fernandez, for telling me, yes, I posted a PowerPoint that was, like, super duper weird and not finished. So thank you, Professor Fernandez, for figuring that out. And we got a couple of distress calls from the students, like, what happened?
That's okay. We fixed it. We're fine.
I was like, good. Oh yeah, I probably just looked at, like, the first 6 slides and we're like, it's beautiful. And then, like, moved on. And then she's like, oh wait, no. So dyslexia is typically, they're all brain-based, by the way. I love how they say this is brain-based. They're all brain-based, because think about it, like, everything, all of our motor comes from our brain. So dyslexia has to do with a person's to read. Now, sometimes for some people, it's how they read, or sentence moves around, the words move around, the letters move around. It can be different for everybody, right? But then again, the phonological processing of how to say, is this jumping or jumped? And so you might hear some kids when they're little, they're just learning, they're going to make a lot of mistakes. So that's fine. As they get older, you can start to see if they're more comfortable in these things that changed. Again, I'm trying to do like Spanish on Duolingo every night. And it's interesting because they tell you, oh, well, this is, you're going to be learning this type of verb. And I'm like, I don't even know what that verb is in English. Like, you know, that's the imperfect preterite. I don't know that stuff. So we don't get too technical with kids as they're learning, but when they get older, then yes, you're going to be like, oh, you didn't know that I jumped yesterday, or you went running this morning. Again, when kids are little, they're just trying all this language on for sight. They're hearing it from you. So please model appropriate language. Dysgraphia has to do with writing. It's all brain based. And sometimes you'll see it in younger kids. You know what they didn't put on here is that apraxia is more of a neuromuscular issue, but apraxia can be a baseline for some of these things. We'll talk about that in just a sec. But dysgraphia has a lot to do with writing. And so see if I can show them the picture. So I like to show people a picture. I see if I can see myself on this one. I know because I have a background. I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to see this. So you guys can see I have like a white, okay, sorry. If I leave it right there, can you see it?
Oh, I see the white, but
Okay.
I don't see.
Right, so it's just white right now. So if I move this, it disappears. So I'm trying to just get to where it's white. Now I'm gonna put this picture on here. This is what my son drew me.
Okay, we can still see it.
Okay, cool. So you guys see it's like a green truck or green car.
We can't read what it says.
No, you don't have to read what it says. I think it just says Land Rover.
Okay.
So you guys can see it, right?
Mhm.
So how old do you think he was when he drew that picture for me? You're not going to offend me. Just throw a number out there. What grade, what age?
Like 7.
Like 7? Anyone else?
I know the answer, so I refuse to answer.
I won't make you guys, I won't drag it out too much longer. So he drew that for me 2 months ago. He's 14. Yeah. So this is what dysgraphia looks like in an older child. And he's had about the same skill set since about, yeah, I would say 7. This is kind of where he stopped. Now, again, he's got other things on developmental delays, drug exposed, he has autism, ADHD, or whatever. Right. But this is a child who holds a pen or a pencil perfectly. He can type, no problem. He does argue with spell check though, because he's a teenager. And yeah, I tell him, keep them coming. I love it. He drew my favorite truck for me. I was like, I love you. I keep it coming. I keep it in the office, but it looks very rudimentary. It looks very young forever. And by the way, my writing's not much better than that. So if you take classes with me, then I don't write a lot on the board. And when I do, I'm like trying to really hard to be like, you know, teacher writing, and still it's like, whatever. So ironically, I have it organically. He has it organically for a different reason. He's adopted, but what I'm saying to you is like, it's just common. It's more common than you think. And you'll see it within our book, and we'll talk more about it, like the patterns of the letters, the spacings off. Even today, his one-on-one aide said, I know you typed it, but go back and make sure every sentence has a capital at the front and a period at the end. So those rules between dysgraphia and ADHD, yeah, that's like, I hope that turns out right. And then dyscalculia is a math issue. Now, again, it could be something where you do not understand the linear process of math, or you're looking at the numbers and they jumble up like dyslexia, or you go to write one down and another one comes out, or you understand the math, but as you're calculating and getting more technical, it starts to fall apart. It looks different on different people. And I just tell you, mine shows up differently on different days. So again, we're always as adults trying to say, look for sameness. It's not the same. All people with dyslexia are not the same. All people with dysgraphia are not the same. All people with dyscalculia are not the same. And by the way, you can have all 3.
I think that's what's the struggle for a lot of teachers. Like they'll think of like, oh, I know dyslexia. I had a student 3 years ago who had dyslexia and they were horrible spellers. And then they have this kid in here who is spelling marvelously. He passed all his spelling tests, but his writing is atrocious, or you're reading out, he refuses to read out loud. And that's not dyslexia, because I had dyslexia and they're terrible spellers. And so
They're
I
terrible
think
readers. Kids with dyslexia aren't good readers. No,
right.
this child has like learned how to slow down and be, and like, and sometimes, honestly, glasses help too. Like when I got glasses, that kind of helped. My eyes were getting tired. I do have myopia. And so when my eyes are less tired, I have less of those things too. So just little tools and tricks and again, I don't study super duper late at night. I cannot manage new information late at night. I can review stuff late at night, but I cannot manage new information late at night. Cannot do it. Even though I can be fully awake, my brain's just not, right? So there's little tips and tricks that we can help our kids learn. So again, with when it comes to this is that performance gap, that unexpected underachievement. So let's say you have most of the classes on this performance line, and then you have this student who's just not keeping up performance wise. And it could be this graphic looks like the child's a little bit like the inattentive type. We'll talk about that in ADHD. Sometimes they're just elsewhere. And by the way, when the gap starts getting wider, it takes way more time to catch up, right? To stay on track, it's almost like anything, like with any sort of like, to keep up with your laundry, your dishes, just to do laundry and dishes to keep up on it, it's great. But once it gets way super duper far behind, oh, does it take extra work. And by the way, to require extra work of children who don't have the skill to sit there, manage, look, focus, concentrate, or even care, that is going to take 10 times the work just to get back on track. So again, the early intervention piece is so we don't get off track. If we start to get off track, then we got to course correct a little bit. And you'll see, like, again, nobody's on a perfectly straight line. Even some kids are like higher performing, and then they start to go down a little bit, and then it's a trend line, right? And sometimes, let's say, we'll learn even when children have the flu, their hearing's not as strong, and they're feeling crummy, they're not paying attention. You're going to see a dip in performance. And then sometimes it's a highly preferred activity. You're going to see a swing out in performance that are doing even better. But again, overall, students with disabilities, they tend to start to veer, and it's harder. It's just like we have to then ask more of them than they are capable to give. So it's really hard. So if you see some, children like not keeping up, we got to get in there as soon as possible. Same thing here. So we see here, this is like, if we're measuring our students' performance, this is kind of what a typical child would do, right? This is what let's say, whatever this is right here, word identification fluency, words per minute. I don't know if you guys remember this, but like in first grade, it's like they give you a paragraph, and it's line by line, and it'll tell you how many words are on there, and then you time it, and then you circle when you're done, and then you literally count the words, and they will count that. And I'm telling you, my kid was behind like the first part of first grade, and I was like, cringe, because I do love to read, even though my brain's grieving. I do love to read, but I tell you what, we just doubled down on the reading, and we found highly preferred topics for him. And by the time he came back after Christmas, he caught up. So it looks something like this. He was this kid over here, right in the middle, who was kind of like, he was going upwards, but he wasn't going upwards like typically expected fast enough. And even over here, Emily had like a little gap. She had a bad week, or she had a bad day, or whatever. No big deal, right? And so here's this piece where you're like, okay, he's moving up, but we need to go here. So Marco says right here, it's like he has this piece. And so then when we put in the intervention, he catches way up, which is really great. Now this last guy right here, Josh, he's kind of has some ups and downs. This is what my kid looks like in the behavior model, ups and downs, ups and downs. And then you put in these interventions, and it looks very similar. It kind of went up a little bit, but then I had a spiky week, and maybe that trend after tier 3 would look greater. But this is the one. This is the unexpected underachievement. This is with supports, and he's still not doing that great. We need some more supports, or maybe more specific supports. Right? Does that make sense? I do like the graphics in the book for this respect. Okay, so again, we did talk about reading, writing, math. It can be more than one area. And here's dysgraphia. This is what it looks like. This is almost precisely what my kid's writing looks like with math. And now the funny thing is he's doing linear algebra, polynomials, like 3y plus 4x equals 8z. And I'm like rolling my eyes like barf, right? I could do it. I just did it in the 7th grade, right? He is a little bit behind. He's doing it in the 9th grade, which isn't terrible. But if he could get half of his numbers on a line, and we use graph paper now, we use the boxes. He likes the boxes better. And there's apps for this stuff too. And so I did put in the module, Mod Math, very cool, but it's only for iPads. So $5.50 plus $15. Guess what? He forgot a decimal point and 2 zeros. He's going to get this wrong. Right? So if they don't understand the concept of decimal points, or they forgot about it, if this is 15 cents, $5.50 plus 15 cents, we're good. Right? But there's no 1 here. So this isn't $6.65.
But you think of like just the fact that you said that your son is using graph paper, like if you were to take that and like make a larger box,
yep.
If you're working in tens, hundreds, thousands, the rate of acquisition, or even if you were to test him, that's my point. Those accommodations, again, the teacher making the tiniest accommodation. Are we dealing with an actual LD, or are we dealing with something else?
Right.
Key.
Right. And then again, in the writing, you can see before they erased, everything was kind of jumbled up. I mean, there's some misspellings, but that's not the end of the world. But again, this is the mad scientist laughed like something at his plan. And so a lot of erasing, a lot of frustration. There's no way my kid could write on college ruled paper, not at all. And so I do little tips and tricks at home. He says, mom, we're out of, lunch meat or whatever. I'm like, okay, write me a list.
That's funny that you say that. In the world of texting, while I've had 4 kids that have texted, I'm not a fan of texting. I had one daughter who has dyscalculia. I would make her text me all the time just because it gave her an option, because I wanted to make sure it wasn't dyslexia. I was trying to figure out what road are we in. Right. But I made her text all the time. She was the one kid I gave the phone to early because I wanted her to text more, which is probably bad now. But I mean, so you think of what some of the tools you have to use.
Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, I have to pause. And I will see you guys in a little bit. Are you good with taking off?
Oh, I am. Okay, the Great American Shakeout. All right. Okay, have fun. Okay, here we go. So we got some examples of dysgraphia, and then probably some dyscalculia here with the numbers. And then, oh gosh, you go to word problems. Okay, so now are we dealing with a dyscalculia? Are we dealing with a dyslexia? Because we've taken math and put it into a word problem. And I've noticed with Common Core, Common Core, a lot of math has moved more into of a word, of a problem that's more language orientated, trying to pull in language arts into the math. So I think it's going to make it more, as we move, spend more time into Common Core, it's going to make trying to figure out if we have a true math issue or a true language issue a little bit more convoluted, because so much of the math is within the language. Now math has definitions. I remember my child coming home and saying, when did math get definitions? So word problems, if you've struggled with word problems, it's bringing that language into the mathematics of it. You're going to struggle right away because you're having to figure out what you're reading, comprehend what you're reading on top of the math. And I think this is a really good opportunity to talk about, they're not mutually exclusive. Like you don't, if you have dysgraphia, you don't have dyslexia. No, you can have dysgraphia, dyslexia, and dyscalculia. You can have all three. If you do have all three, you're probably going to need a lot of support. But you don't always just get one, although one would be the easiest to work with. All right, so then let's move on to disabilities often have problems with visual and auditory processing. I don't know if you guys noticed at the bottom of 6.3, they talked about myths as it relates to visual and auditory processing. We'll talk about that in a second. And then deficits in working memory are in other characteristics of learning disabilities. So this would be working memory, like letter, name, fluency. So I'm just going to test you guys real quick. Tell me, is this dysgraphia, dyscalculia, or is this dyslexia? You can type it in too. Letter, name, fluency. So we're dealing with letters. Naming them. Say it again.
Dysgraphia?
Dysgraphia? Okay, dysgraphia would be if I were to write it, but we're naming them. So if I were to say letter write fluency, then it would be dysgraphia. But I'm going to say letter naming, that would be dyslexia. So not naming them. So go P, T, S, Z, Z, R. And even to say that the P is capitalized and the T is lowercase. Now, this is something that even like, I don't know about Jay, what grade you're working in, but I know Molly, you're with the little ones. And so I would say around 3, we're working on, like the coconut tree that the letters fall on and off. They're looking at these symbols. And so this is when you start seeing, oh, wait a minute, they keep saying B is D or B is P. And we keep doing this, where his peers, where if you go back to, oh, you know what? I do not have, as I'm talking, I do not have control over the, you guys don't see what I'm seeing. Oh my gosh. Hold on. Oh my gosh. I just realized that because I'm looking at it on my other computer and I'm like, wait a minute, you don't know what I'm talking about. How do you,
that was just my computer.
Okay, let me see if I can share. Oh boy, that would make so much more sense. Okay, I apologize. You guys are probably, she's crazy. Okay, hold on. Let me find it on my laptop just a sec. Because I have it on my other computer. Hold on. Okay, there it is. Let me go to the screen. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's see. Okay, now let's share. Desktop. Okay, let's see. Now I want to go to, sorry guys, we didn't plan this through, so just a sec. Why is this not working? It's being difficult, just a sec. I appreciate your patience. Well, this is just silly. Oh, I don't know why it's not working. Oh boy. Okay, for some reason it's not working. Do you guys have your books? Do you have access to your books?
Yes, I'm using mine.
Okay. Jay, do you have access to your book?
Yes, I just got home, so I'm getting access right now.
Okay, I am so sorry, but I'm going to give you guys a page to look at because that's where we are. Let me go to. Okay, go to page 143, topic 6.3, characteristics. Let me know when you guys are there. Okay, good. Jay, do you need a little bit more time?
Yeah, like 2 seconds.
Okay. Molly, do you see that letter fluency chart there? Now, does that make sense? Because
Yes.
it's like, just
Saw
like
it right after.
yeah. And so you can see, so that was the chart that I was referring to. So you can see even at the younger ages, the early intervention portion of it, like just labeling capital versus lowercase, identifying the L's and the I's, those are so hard. And so if you have a child, like say child A is like, okay, we are mixing up our B's and our D's. We do it all the time in the lowercase world, right? Our B's and our D's are mixed up, and we're that way for like 3, 4, and 5. All right, so we're not going to call it an LD by any stretch of the imagination, but moving into kindergarten, that would be something you would want to write on as chart notes, is that we did not progress in an age appropriate manner or in an expected time frame to learning learning the letter name fluency, versus somebody who would identify a B as a D, but then 3 weeks later knew exactly what the B and the D were. That would be somebody who's just learning letters, and that would be developmentally appropriate. So that's that would be in the area of dyslexia. Okay, so now I got to switch screens. So I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to the thing so I stay on topic. Okay. Although I really do like, if you keep going down on that screen, how they talk about some tools. That's one thing when we get kids with LDs. They're really hard to teach, guys. They're really, really hard. They're not, as a general ed teacher, we aren't giving tools on how to help the children that are struggling. And so if you looked on page 144, right below our chart, the decoding, the note-taking, and the mathematical calculations, I love that they're putting these tools in. I wished my children were better note takers. I think I tell you guys in all your work, your note taking skills, like when I like what I see, it is something you have to learn. You have to learn not to write everything that the paragraph said. You have to learn to pull out the main topic, and then you have to learn how to support that main topic. That isn't easy for our dyslexic kids. Either they do one of two things. They write down everything they hear, like the Mark Twain rode this ship back in, like, no, all you need is Mark Twain and year. And they wrote everything. They wrote the pronouns, everything. And then if you have dysgraphia, and then you're writing for the note taking, that's even harder. So these kinds of skills, this is what a teacher's looking for. Like if their notes are rough, clue into that consistently. If they're not decoding, like if you noticed, especially the younger kids, if you notice like quiet and cute, if you notice like cut and cute, or quiet and quit, if you start noticing those kinds of decoding issues consistently, pay attention to that, and then really, hone in on those areas, because there could be a decoding issue. I did like that, and we didn't put that in the notes. Okay, let's go to prevalence and placement. And so in our book, since I cannot figure out how to share my screen with you tonight, go to the next page, page 144, prevalence and placement, 6.4. So in our pie of what we're looking at, LDs are the second highest to speech and language impairment. I will tell you, working in the younger population, SLP impairments tend to morph into LDs. They do, especially I think I read somewhere about maybe 3 years ago, if the child's syntax, so that's their grammar, is not, really clued in by age 2 to 3, we're moving into an LD really sharply. That syntax is that window of how the sentence structure forms. If we mix up him and her a lot, or in and out, it's a huge difference. He climbed out of the window versus she climbed into the window. It's a totally separate sentence. If they haven't figured that out, we're on a road that needs a little bit more support into the LDs at that 39%. And then all other disabilities. So all other disabilities, actually the LDs, okay, I'm sorry. This is looking at two different things. Sorry. The speech and language at a younger age is higher and then moves over to the LDs. This pie is reflecting an older age. So older age wise, the LDs and the other disabilities, so the other disabilities are bigger, the LDs are the middle one, and then the SLPs are the smaller. Because after 6 or 7, especially at 9, speech and language is no longer the issue. You should have mastered it. And if you haven't, then it's going to move into another disability or an LD. And you can see that down here too, like the learning disabilities is the red one up at the top. Then you have this is the next graph, guys, underneath it. Then you have the speech and language impairment underneath that. And then there's this cluster of colors, the intellectual disabilities, the which I think we talk about next week, the emotional and behavioral disorders, and then autism on its own. And sometimes autism can fall into those 3 categories altogether. So that's your prevalence. And it's so others, and then LDs are the hardest. And most LD kids are in gen ed. That's the other thing, is they're not getting identified for special ed. They would be in like pull out services or push in services, a lot of 504 plans. If you could get them an IEP, that would be great, but they are typically in gen ed classes. Percentage of students age 6 to 21 served under IDEA, specific learning disabled category. So here you have your number. In the public school setting is the blue line, and then students with disabilities. So you can see they're being serviced in special ed is quite low, very low. Most of them are in gen ed. That makes it really, really hard, really, really hard. And those gen ed teachers, I mean, they're trying to teach reading. They don't have time, if they're struggling with reading, to spend more time on, is it a or eh? They're trying to move with the flow of the class. So that makes it really, really hard. Educational placement of students with disabilities. So here we have 69%, greater than 80%. Here the yellow is in regular education. Parentally placed in private schools. That happens a lot, guys. I'm sure, depending on where some of you guys are at. I know South County, if they're struggling in school, they get pulled out and put into a private school. I think a lot of parents think that the rules are different in a private school. Parents will do that. A lot of times they pull out and do something different. They'll do a co-op, they'll do homeschooling. We have a lot of charter types of programs now in Orange County, but that is parentally placed. Homebound and hospital, so those are more your medically fragile kids. 40 to 79% in regular classes, and then separate school, residential facility. Oh my goodness, greater than 40% in a regular class over here, and then correctional facilities. So we can see towards 21, I would hope, the correctional facilities here, 6 to 21. I think the biggest thing is the majority of the class of that group is gen ed taught. Cultural and linguistic considerations. Is that on our slides? I'm just going off the book. Here we go. We did all of those. No, it's not. So then we're going to go to 6.5. You guys cannot see. I'm so sorry. Challenges and their solutions. Is it LD or language difference? The following questions can guide teachers in considering whether their students' poor performance is caused by a learning disability or by characteristics associated with a second language. So now let's go back to my chapter and see. And I know Molly shared with us that a student of hers who they had been worried about was an actual dual language learner. And so I know we talked about that last week. So a huge challenge for us. We're on 6.5 now, page 149. In Orange County, I think dual language is just a huge part of what we deal with. And so now, okay, so Molly, let's say you were teaching first grade and you were trying to figure that this kid has a dual language. And so now do we have an LD in a dual language, or is it just the dual language? So you can see how it gets, the problem kind of scaffolds the older they get. So in early intervention, we can say, no, it's just a dual language issue and present both languages. And so they become, they become age appropriate in both languages versus getting them at, kindergarten and first grade. And now we're trying to figure out, is it a dual language or do we have a learning disability? Is a learning disability in both languages or is it just in one language? That's a huge challenge. That's a huge challenge. I would think you would need some support for that.
They can be like dyslexic in Spanish, but not in English.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that dyslexia is hard. They can be dyslexic in just 2 letters. They could be seriously mixing up 2 separate letters, but let's say it's the E and the A. That changes a lot of words for you. Those are 2 vowels. So it's real. That's why you need I know a million years ago, I don't know if I do know a lot of districts don't have them anymore. They used to have a credential called a reading specialist. And so you would specifically send your students to this reading specialist. And all she did was decode for you. She just figured out this child's reading patterns and then tried to equip them with tools specific to that pattern. I know my husband's district doesn't have them anymore. He's in Santa Ana. What is it? The 2nd largest district in Orange County. Oh, good. She's back. We had a shared screen issue. So we broke out I couldn't figure it out. It's my fault. So we broke out our books. They were great team players and we made numbers and where we were, but we have not been moving along in our slides. So I apologize.
No worries. No worries. Yeah, I'm back. It was like me and a bunch of like water dudes. We had to walk all the way out to the parking lot and it was kind of fun. Like, oh my God. Yeah. And then I come back on the way back. I meet up the janitors. They're like, yeah, we gotta do it too. Like, okay. Can you see?
Yes. Okay. We're way down. We are on past this. Keep going. Wait, whoa. Stop. We are do 19 for, no, do 21 for me. We're at 21.
Yay.
Okay, and actually we might be at the next one. We just did this one. So go to 22.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, we're here at 22 accommodations.
Yo. Oh yeah, I heard you talking about reading specialists.
Yes. So we were talking about the challenges and their solutions. So sometimes I was using Molly's example. Girls, I'm going to repeat myself. I'm sorry. I was using Molly's example of how she had her little student that they figured out was a dual language, but early intervention allows them the time to get both languages age appropriate. But let's say the kid comes in at kindergarten, first grade. We don't know if we're dealing with a dual language, an LD,
or 9 or 10. Yeah.
Correct. If the LD's in one language, in both languages, and kind of just separating them. And then I had just spoken about, I loved reading specialists. We used one for my daughter and she was phenomenal. I mean, just decoded the way she read and then helped her. And
I don't have a degree at SAC. There was like a certificate or something just in reading. We had a reading department at SAC.
Yeah, it's huge. It was huge. And now I don't think they use them at all. I don't think my husband is in Santa Ana. It's the 2nd largest district. They don't have them anymore. I have a girlfriend who's a reading specialist and she's doing administration.
Yeah, and what I learned with that kind of stuff is that, you know, in our book, excuse me, like in chapter 4, and we talk about related services and SLP and OT and PT and all that, you know, that is the best of all given worlds. And technically all districts are supposed to have all these different these resources and supports. They may not have 7 people who can cover all the bases. They may have 1 or a 0.6 position who's also the librarian or something, you know, and it's been hard. I can tell you, like, what we teach and what is out there is not necessarily the same. Mm-hmm. And I mean, IDEA, and you guys are going to learn this as you go forward in your careers, is that the larger an organization gets, and I'm talking about IDEA now, the federal government, the larger the organization gets, sometimes they miss the trickle down on how it gets to the actual implementation. And so IDEA will say, you need to have all these supports. And yes, it is the law, but a specific district or maybe a rural district will say, yeah, we have that person, they're a part-time person, and they're assigned to 8 different schools over a 200-mile radius. So yeah, there may be a reading specialist in Santa Ana School District, but there's like 2 of them for this massive district, and they are assigned to the earliest learners, like the least able learners. I don't want to say the lower functioning ones. We don't say lower functioning. We don't say low IQ. We definitely don't use the R word.
The biggest
But
challenges.
the higher risk, the higher risk categories, the bigger challenges. So there might be some, or they've wrapped up reading into some other like language and literacy position, or it's an SLP with a reading,
They try to do that a lot. An SLP who likes to specialize in reading, I've seen them try to do that. There's a difference though. There's quite a difference. So I guess the takeaway, ladies, would be if you are noticing patterns from all of our great BCBAs that want to be there and studying, that's what you're looking for, is the same patterns in the math, in the reading, in the writing. If you can find that pattern, then you can start to find a solution. You may have to go knock and like Google reading specialist in Orange County or writing specialist in Orange County, or but then you can start to try to solve some of these problems. But finding that pattern, I think those specialists have just really honed in on.
So one of my godsons had an issue with not the S at the beginning of a word, but if there was 2 S's in the middle of a word, he would drop the middle. So they found it was like, I think it was S's and F's, anything that had curve in it. And so it was something, and then they got him glasses, and it was like, it kind of was like a bunch of little supports that kind of all lined up, and he's doing great. He's going to be a commercial pilot. He's like, a pilot. Yeah. So like, sometimes we get in this mode, we're like, oh my gosh, it's so hard. Yeah, but they're like, 6 and 5. And we're not going to be this way forever.
And the other thing is that we're not dealing with an intellectual impairment. They understand. They are motivated. They are naturally, we call them in ABA, like motivational operation is to learn. You are not battling them. Yeah. And so that is that's great. He's going to be a pilot. Like he is not capable. So use those tools. He will help you. She will help you find that. Say, what are you seeing right now? When I point to this, tell me what you're seeing.
So and this is another piece, same thing, like that foundation of wanting to learn and desiring to learn. I tell you what, like I have to say, like, even though my son has had a lot of challenges of the past several years, we had parent teacher conferences last week, and 2 of the teachers said, he's a pleasure to have in class. He really loves to learn. And I just about had a heart attack. I'm sure like, I need to relish this feeling because it's never been this feeling before. And then his math teacher said, and you know what? He doesn't hate math. And that's real nice. And I said, yes, the fact that you have a teenager, he doesn't say he's good at math, but he doesn't hate math. Isn't that kind of all where we just need to be?
Absolutely.
Somewhere in the middle. And I was like, you know what, that is probably a treat. Like as a math teacher, that's going to be a real hard job. And I'm like, a middle school / high school math teacher. And then she's like, he doesn't hate math and he can do it. He does peter out, or his letters get really hard to read, but like there's all these little things around it. But overall, if you have a child who loves to learn, if you can instill that early and don't stigmatize them with their quirks and their possible learning disabilities that are, again, I do ask my students in my face-to-face classes, how many of you had a teacher who told you you'd never be good at math? And it's most students, and that is not okay. And so again, that's kind of why we like the little ones, because we're never that teacher, right? And we don't see them sitting down doing linear algebra, but we are there to instill that love of learning. And I think that's the fun part. That's the beautiful part. And again, keep the mindset open. And we'll talk more about mindset, about, kids who stop wanting to learn. It does show up around 13, 14. So then you have a closed off teenager. We don't want that, right? And again, it's not about telling a child that they're a genius when they get 1 out of 10 right. That's not it either. You just I like your effort. Praise the process. Tell them, you know what, maybe they didn't get it today, but you know what, you got something earlier this morning. You're probably going to do a little bit better later this afternoon, and tomorrow's a new day. So keeping that forward momentum makes all the difference between their life, your day, their year, their like learning career. It's a career. Going to school is a career. So again, keep it light, keep it open for possibilities, and they'll follow suit. They'll follow suit. And I do love that. Loving to learn. I mean, obviously I'm a learner. You can't hate learning and be like a teacher or be in a preschool. Like, it's something that you can instill. It really is a cultural issue. Like, anybody from any culture can love to learn. So culture and learning in itself is its own culture. Going to school and educational environments is its own culture. Help support your child's culture, your students' culture, your child's culture of wanting to learn and be in school. I love it. Love it. Okay, so we did talk a little bit about accommodations. My 2 cents here is like, you don't know what works until you try it. And certain days, certain things will work, and certain days things won't work. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes, like, I have to tell you right now, certain topics of mine, I'm not great at macro and micro econ. Economics. Everybody has their least favorite subject, but it doesn't mean I didn't try, right? And I think I still got a B or an A or whatever, but like, if you know your student well enough to know that science is their favorite or math is their least favorite, do you save math to the very end of the day when they're tired and burnt out and they're sick of you? No, you figure out when they're fresh, and you can't always work their schedule around them, but you can work in these pieces when you know that it's the best time for them. And so there's these pieces that you need to know them a little bit more than they know themselves in order to actually think of these accommodations. You're not gonna have a 4-year-old go, I really could use a distraction-free environment, and to be able to do this assessment prior to lunch when I don't have a full belly and I'm kind of wanting to take a little nappy nap, right? They will not advocate for themselves. The parents can and the teachers can. So again, just giving them more time ahead of the test, during the test. Like, our Peyton's like history teacher emailed us about an exam next Tuesday. I was like, that's a little premature, but we'll take it. Thanks. Let's do. Now I just have to, ask him questions. I learned with my kid, if I sit down and say, we have to do this work, I'm going to get a lot of behaviors. But I've said, hey, what's Mr. Nguyen talking about? What's on the test? Oh, I don't know. Something about the Civil War. Really? What's your favorite part of the Civil War? I can just get him talking about it. That's going to create newer pathways. It's going to create some interest. And then sometimes I'll kind of not trick him, but I'll be like, hey, so I heard like the Civil War was the only war that nobody died. There's like 0 casualties. And that's not true, right? So he's like, no, Mom, there were 600,492, 681 deaths in the span of 18 months. Really? I did not know that. Right? So sometimes you're going to play silly, and when it's the little ones, you could play silly with, I forgot what the color blue looks like. Can you tell me? That's it. You're right. Or, oh, are you sure? Because I thought that was purple. That's blue. You reminded me. Thank you. They do like to think that they're teaching you. So sometimes previewing vocabulary, having advanced organizers, having a schedule, having things color coded. Again, reading digital text might be easier for some of them, might not be as easy. When you're making things on a computer, you can make the text really, really large. Right? I've worked where we had kids learning to write their name, and it was huge over the whole paper. And then you just make boxes and get it into the smaller boxes over a couple of weeks, and they start to. So it's all about shaping behaviors and getting little tiny goals towards a larger goal, but it doesn't have to happen today. You have a testing period, or you have a month, or you have a week, or you have like these months to do things like that. So again, these accommodations have to do with how long the goal is, how achievable the goal is, how fast that goal needs to be maintained or not. Verbal cues, a lot of times kids you want to talk about getting prompt dependent. Sometimes if you always tell them, don't forget to wash your hands, they don't remember on their own. Now, when they're super little, you probably have to remind like 9 times out of 10. But as they get older, you don't want to give them all the cues. You don't want to give them all the prompts. You don't want, you see it with the little ones, right? When you ask them a question and they like look up at an adult for the answer. You're like, oh, people have been answering for you, I see. Right? So sometimes accommodations include study guides and giving hints. Like I'll do it in class. I'll be like, hey, I'm writing this on the board because you guys know I don't like to write on the board, right? So if I'm writing on the board, it's probably on the quiz or test, right? Like I still do it, right? Repeating key information or directions, having somebody read to them, having a screen reader to them. I don't know if you guys noticed that in our Canvas, we have a screen reader now, which is really, really cool. Up at the top, it says immersive reader. Click on it, try it out. Because if you're a non-native English speaker or you want to figure out even parts of the speech, you can color code a noun to be one color and a verb to be one color and an adjective to be another. It's really cool. It's really cool. So check that out. And that's another way that we can support people who have reading or learning challenges without saying, okay, well, you only get the tool if you have a reading or learning challenge. That is a universal design because that goes over in everybody's Canvas, right? So maybe one day you have a migraine and you're still trying to read the page, but maybe you can't really read it. You can't really look at it. You're having a hard day or you're super distracted. And sometimes when somebody's reading it out to you, it helps. That's for everybody, right? Changing the settings or again, noise reduced plays, giving them a quiet area and room. I can tell you, sometimes things really distract me and sometimes I can really tune things out. And I know if I struggle with that, other people are struggling with that, right? Sometimes small group settings, giving students more, right here, scheduling or timing, giving them a set of time, giving a break in the middle. In my classes, take off all the time restrictions. So take as much time as you want. That's not very common because again, like a lot of public school settings don't have like all the time in the world, right? And those students aren't doing stuff online. But here in college, it's like we get to pick if I want to make that fast for myself or make it not fast for myself. Do I want to turn it on this day or the next day? That's part of adulting too. So you're learning skills as you're learning skills. Yeah. And then responses. If a child has a trouble writing, one of my son's accommodations that he can say the right answer to a scribe or he can type it. And sometimes he'll try to use the scribe because he doesn't even want to type. I'm like, barf, right? You know, so you have to know if he's just trying to, pull some shenanigans. Like, no, you can type this one. But the scribe can't change the words. The scribe can only just write exactly the words. Let's see. Yeah. Note takers, calculators. There's recording devices. There's these cool recording pens now. The digital pen, really cool stuff. So there's a bunch of different ways that we can support students because here's the bottom line. They just need to know this stuff. They don't need to know the stuff the way that we know the stuff. They just need to know the stuff and we need to be able to assess that they know the stuff. Right.
And I have to tell you, I mean, having raised 4 children in school or 2.5 or 2 are going through school still. This is stuff that you're looking at is for every single one of us. Like, I don't know how many times I have told them, let's get, our calendars out and we're going to organize the week so that, the test is next week. The first day you do the outline, the next day you make the flashcards, the next day you review what you said. I know in high school, they start to add, classes. I think Ability does that for this, for these kinds of skills, but these are things we can all
absolutely use. And I do the thing where I asked my kiddo like, so what color is history class? Oh, that one's right. That one's brown. What color is language arts? Oh, Mom, language arts is blue every time. Oh, okay. And so, let them choose. And then you just follow their lead on that kind of stuff. Because if I was picking the color, I'm going to pick the wrong color. Right. And then another thing, he works for pens and highlighters and he gets a little hoardy on that kind of stuff, but who cares if it's going to help him highlight and organize and color code, win-win, right? Yeah. So they didn't even talk about that, right? And so there's a bunch of different things that we can do. We do have to help them utilize those tools because again, he uses Grammarly. He did learn to use Grammarly on a test one time and then, got in trouble for that failed test. It's like, okay. He's like, but I was using my tool. It's like, you can't use Grammarly on a spelling test.
That was pretty smart though.
All right. So again, right. Self-esteem is not the issue. So again, here's the thing. Again, kids are not going to advocate for themselves. So we have to kind of clue in knowing who they are and just ask them, does it help when I chew it in different colors? Does it help when I give you a little thumbs up over here that gives you a reminder? That's write that down, write that down.
And I also think too, Professor Laney, I think that helps the teacher realize there might be an LD.
Yes.
If they can identify that they aren't doing something right, and you can give them a tool and that changes it, then all of a sudden you may be in the LD category.
Right. Now, take a step back for a second. We as teachers, we don't diagnose. We don't even categorize. The team puts them in the IDA category, right? So like you could say in the back of your head, I think there might be something here. Then you make the referral to the assessment team, right? You could say, I think there may be, and this is my evidence, because you know, student A, B, and C, they do best when it's in color, when the handouts are in color, or they have just a little bit more time, or they work through recess. Not like we want them to work through recess, but you tested it out. Maybe that child just needed 5 more minutes, right? Or they didn't need to feel pressure. Like everybody ran out to recess and you just say, hey, you just need 5 more minutes. And they go, yeah. And then they did 10 times better. You have a little bit of kind of like anecdotal data to forward to the team. And then the team gets together. The team will ask you, so what makes you think they did it? Well, I notice when it comes to a time test or a writing test, they really get freaked out and anxious and all their scores. So like, again, my kid's doing really well. He's getting A's and B's. And then all of a sudden he took a test and his grade dipped. And he's like, well, he said, well, you know, I've never really been good at taking tests. And I was like, you know what, you're right. We can look at some other ideas for that. We can look at some other supports for that. And so is this an important test? Yeah. Then should he maybe get a second chance, more time in distraction-free environments? Was he doing it right before recess where he really wanted to go out and play with the guys? And so he just dialed through it really fast? Terribly? Probably. So we can look at the different things that are we setting the child up for failure or success? And again, a lot of students aren't advocating for themselves. I think now in high school or junior high school, he uses the word advocacy, kind of use it very generally, but yeah, you're not gonna get a 4-year-old saying perhaps, Professor Valencia, Miss Karen, perhaps I could use a distraction-free environment. Do you imagine?
I'd like to meet that 4-year-old though.
I'm sure there's one in a million. But so again, we will see some of these things pop up in the early pre-K learning. But again, now that we're starting to talk about universal preschool, or at least TK, we want more people to be more aware of these things. And so can you talk about the difference between phonemic and phonological awareness?
When you make a sound, phonological would be like the fluency of it all put together. So phonemic is like for M, and then phonological awareness would be M-O, it says ma, M-A says ma. So it's just putting it together.
Good, cool. And again, so when kids are little and they're just learning how to hold their pencils, they don't always do it right. So it just takes a little bit of support, a little scaffolding. But again, once they start holding it right and then they're still not writing well, you got to move on to the next, like, okay, what could it be? That I have friends who are teachers in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, and they'll talk about, that like half of my students are missing one-to-one correspondence. Like if I have an apple and Jenny has an apple, how many apples do we have together? She's like, I have 3rd graders who can't do it. And so you don't know if that's, they don't understand the math, or they don't understand the language, or they can't put a picture of 2 people together. So there's these things that we can dissect in order to dig down and figure that out.
We talked about this while you were at the earthquake. I think too, with Common Core, the way that it is specifically to math, I think some of that, the reading with the math infusion has kind of complicated. Is it a math issue or is it a reading issue?
It's hard because again, I remember, I think I'm just a little bit better at the English and speaking and stuff like that. I mean, I'm okay with math, but I remember when it came to like linear equations, I was like, barf, I could do it, but it was just dry and boring. But then it would turn into a word problem. I was like, sweet, I can dissect the words and put the numbers here and here and there. But I noticed that not everybody could do that. Yeah. And I think that was because I was a reader, right? And it was math inside of reading versus like, so I had a strong skill set in reading. So if you look at a child like that, if they are lacking in both of those skills, right, then what? How do you figure out which is the one to work on? Exactly. So hard. Did we want to watch the video on phonological awareness?
You can. What time is it?
Let me see. Oh no, it's 8. Let's keep going. It's
Okay.
like, I know we kind of kept going. We don't want to go past, like, we were shooting for 8, but it ends up being around 8:30. So we did talk about early intervention, and again, things, I mean, the earlier the better. The earlier the better. I mean, think of any skill that you wanted to learn and you never really mastered. Language, again, we're talking about like, oh, I need to learn this language. The best time to learn a language is when they're little, right? But when do they tell us in school to learn it? Middle school, high school. And we're like, our brains are just kind of over the hump. And I can tell you, when you get older, come back to it, it's easier. I'm telling you, your brain kind of like goes on cruise control a little bit. I always wanted to like learn how to play the guitar, and I never really got it. And then over the summer, I picked up ukulele. I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. I'm like surprised. I was like, oh, my brain's not young, and like my brain's like, oh, I have some of these skills. Let's put it all together. So it's kind of fun. Use what you can do. Mnemonics, graphic organizers, songs, any sort of stories, any sort of thing that helps students remember. And again, it could be colors. It could be write their notes in a certain area of the paper. It could be anything, even in our classes, our notes don't have to be linear. They could be mind maps. They could be cut in colors. They could be handwritten. Anything that helps people learn. Could you imagine if I said everybody has to do a bulleted or Roman numeral, or everybody has to do a mind map? That would turn so many people off and nobody would actually remember it. So learn it, learn the child's learning style and then help them in that. It's like making something stinky or challenging for them in their own way to do it. It makes it so much easier. Do you guys remember any acronyms from like, or mnemonics for when you're coming up?
Roy G. Biv.
Roy G. Biv, all the way. I remember that one. Who knows what that one is? Everybody knows it. Oh my God, everybody knows it. How about
rainbow?
Yeah, that's the rainbow colors. That's red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. How about, here's one to put chills down your spine. Order of operations, PEMDAS, or FOIL. I like to say math terms just to freak people out. We're not going to do math. We're just talking about math. It's metacognition on math, right? So again, some of these things. So you'll see some of the formats in our classes here is like when I say like, what, so what, now what? Do you know everybody has a basis of knowledge on every single chapter that we have here? Same thing with your kiddos in class. They're like, you say something like, do you know about like if you said to a child, do you know about the water cycle? And they're going to say, no, what's that? And you're going to say, but wait a minute, you just told me that you loved it when it rained last week. Did you know rain is part of the water cycle? So you can help them connect to the stuff that they already know. Guess what? You already do know about the water cycle. Oh, I do. So again, that's your joy that sparks joy. Discuss it. Have background knowledge. Tell them that they are a learner and encourage that. Discuss it, model it, memorize it. Sometimes there's cute little songs about it. I mean, come on, preschool, right? It's the ABCs, 7 Ways to Sunday, right? How many times do you guys like hammer down the ABCs, right? And so again, independent practice. The coolest thing is when you see a kid playing in like a sensory tree and they're tracing out letters on their own and you're like, they're playing, but they're also like modeling, or they start teaching each other. Oh, I love it. You're like, oh, I'm gonna be a little teacher. So again, just keep going down, and there's been studies on each one of these. Like, does having a conversation about this anxiety provoking content, does having a conversation about the Civil War, or having a conversation about the water cycle or animals or butterflies, does that help with increasing their knowledge? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And then transition. This is for kids who are older and they're going from high school into some sort of independence or into like college and things like that. And when it comes to learning disabilities, again, if it doesn't really apply to life skills, like you might not see it when it comes to showering or washing dishes or cooking. But if somebody's trying to read the back of a mac and cheese box and the letters are jumping around, that might be intimidating for them. Or they just learn how to wing it. But again, you can encourage these kind of skills, and there are programs that kind of help these things. Hopefully, and I know I heard some schools are getting home ec back. I wish they would call it something different. I think they would honestly call it pre-adulting. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like managing your ATM account. paying bills, like
Oh,
things like
God.
that, getting along with a neighbor, just like things like that. And then again, transition also has to do with like, are they going to go to a school? There are more schools popping up for adult like day programs. I think here in Irvine, there's like an actually school for autism that's just like for adults. And so there's a bunch of different things to ask. It also depends on where their funding source is and if they're part of the regional center or if they're, so there's a lot of different questions. But again, that's kind of way up the road with us.
I wanted to look up the college that the book highlighted that was specific to people with disabilities, and LDs being part of it. It was like Lerner College on the East Coast. The book highlighted it. Yeah.
Cool. And I have to say, like, so I think this is my fourth college that I've worked at. This, I mean, I'm a little bit biased, but they do such a good job here. They
That's great.
really do such a good job here. And not because I know the director over there and she's amazing. She's such a great advocate. But they do a really good job here. I haven't had anybody turned away. I haven't had anybody like blown off or ignored. Like, there's pieces where they try their best, and that's another piece of the puzzle. Child development can lead into disability studies. You could end up working in disabled student services at a college or university. So this leads into that kind of stuff too. So this is just like, one step towards that goal. So again, we did talk about just slightly about origins and histories, but I found like an old black and white video, and Alicia put it in the module too. So check that one out, because it's like, we won't have time to do it right now in class, but like, it's like those old grainy reel to reel that somebody turned it into like a VHS or a video recording, and how they used to manage students with learning disabilities. It's a lot more strict, organized. I don't know. I mean, it's okay. Just go back and look at it. It's really interesting. I like the old stuff. And when we get, FYI, when we get into like the like people who have no vision and no hearing, like Helen Keller, I have videos of her. And yeah, I love the old stuff. So yeah, there's lots of really cool things to be learned from the past, and either we replicate the good stuff or leave the bad stuff, right? Medical advances. Okay, big fan of Vanderbilt University, and a lot of stuff. Let's see, we're seeing. I'm gonna make this just a little bit bigger so I can read it. Let's see here. Oh, that helps. Let me make it. Let me see if I can make it black. Yes, not bold, not this one. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So again, I do want a black. So again, there are more medical advances. There are some people that say certain medications might help, but again, this is not the class for too much on the medications. Our suggestion always is have the parents be in close contact with the students' medical providers, right? Sometimes a little bit of Ritalin, and we will talk about medicine in chapter 7 and ADHD. A little bit of Ritalin can help actually funnel the right messages in a brain. And sometimes that helps. I can tell you, when I'm caffeinated, I make less mistakes, but when I'm over caffeinated, I make different mistakes. So, I've noticed that with Peyton, like certain times, like when he does take Ritalin, it kicks in, and like within a nice little hour or two after, he's a little bit more constant in his writing. So again, it's not for everybody, but again, keep in close contact with your medical provider. Personal stories. Oh yeah. We did talk about in the module, there's videos on a bunch of different people, celebrities with learning disabilities, and it's a lot more common. That makes sense. So again, healthcare, brain mapping, technology, some cool stuff in here. I want to just focus on the stuff that's great for our classrooms, like the hands-on. So I love the DMRIs because they tell you where the pathways are coming from. And the funny thing is that when we look at brains, a lot of people think that the messages are coming from the top to the bottom. They're not necessarily. They're coming from the bottom to the top. Because even our body sitting in a seat is receiving information from the environment. And that comes in through our skin and through our nerve endings and through our spinal column up to our brain. Like right now, I could tell you, if I'm in a room that's cold, my skin is reading that and it's sending a message to my brain. Then my brain makes choices. Do I put on a sweater, or I just sit here and whine about it? Right. So this right here, people sometimes go, oh, okay, well, all the information's coming down. No, it's actually going like this, and it's getting stored and it's getting chosen. And then the green ones back and forth a lot of times are the visual cortex. So even though we see here, our visual cortex processes all the way through here. And this is our visual cortex is back here. It stores all of our information that we process through our eyes. And by the way, children and people with autism sometimes have a hyper developed visual cortex. That's why they get really excited about visual things and they start to flap, or they see lines, or they look at lines in the ceiling and the ground, or they line up their toys. So they have a very hyper visual cortex. So that's where this green stuff is coming through. I'm a big fan of like brain scans. Just love it. I just love it. And if you have an extra $3,000, you can have one too. There's people here in Orange County who will do it. You just have to, have a lot of money. And technology. Again, we've mentioned like sometimes hearing something. No, I think it sounds like the janitor, but it sounded like fireworks too. So sorry. You can tell I have sensory issues. So again, technology, it can help for some students, and some students it doesn't. Some students, it does take a certain level of intellectual functioning to use a device. I can tell you a device is very helpful for my son. He had an AT assessment a few months ago. But we also, again, with a clever child who knows how to go on guest browsing and then go on sites he's not supposed to go on while he's doing homework or doing virtual ABA. Like there's certain things like, yes, the technology is great, but sometimes you got to keep a real close eye on it. Thankfully the school like blocks certain things on his own laptop, which is great. Again, assistive technology is not necessarily needed, but there's low tech and high tech, right? So high tech is all the computers and anything with a battery and anything with lights or a computer chip. But low tech could just be a larger pencil. It could be a triangle pencil. It could be
a slant board.
Yeah, a slant board. It could be I know my son would help. He would concentrate when he would have a chair that looked like a regular chair, but it was a rocking chair. So he could like, so he's so physical, he would just rock and he could write better. Fidgets, sometimes those are all low tech. Again, your supports that you want for your student, you want it to have to be like the least restrictive support too. You want to have something that's easily accessible. It doesn't require a lot of batteries. If that helps them get on track, then great. Just keep in mind that those might have to rotate. We used to have like a little fishbowl and he would pick from certain ones and he could earn different ones. And then as he got older, it moved into more highly tech device. But again, you don't want the tech to cause more problems. So ease into the tech. The tech is not always it's not always the needed thing right at the beginning. Try to do the easier supports, the more natural supports, the more environmental supports. If the student is constantly looking over at the bathroom every time somebody walks by, that's what you do. Don't sit them over there, right? If they can't hear you and they're distracted by something else, put them towards the front. Little things like that. That's like low tech supports. And so you guys can do that. Again, when in doubt, always consult with your co-teachers, your master's teachers, your supervisors, your director. Always, always, always get a second opinion on what you think. Because if you're the only person who sees it, maybe it's just you, right? But you want somebody else to back you up. Oh yeah, I saw that too. That every time like there's whatever choices on the page, Jesus will never, ever, ever touch anything orange. Is that big of a problem? No, but let's explore it. Right? So there's different things that show up for different kids at different times. So again, my biggest push on this entire chapter is early intervention. Early intervention. Yeah, so I think that's it. Yeah. Oh yeah, understood. That's a good one. Understood.org is a website that has a lot to do with, it was started as like an ADHD website to provide normalcy and education for parents, teachers, administrators. But I'm telling you, it's really, really branched out. So Understood now talks about early intervention and talks about trauma and resilience. It talks about like implicit versus explicit memory. It talks about brain processes. So again, this website suggested for parents some of these things here. Again, a lot of parents will be like, oh, they need an iPad so they can do X, Y, and Z. Sometimes the iPad's a little bit more of a problem than it's worth. And then they grow into it. We don't need to start off with an iPad. We can get there. But again, what do the parents want? What do the parents see that the child's not performing in? Sometimes the parents will come with a list of stuff. Sometimes they have no clue, right? If you can get people to be specific and see what you can tackle, great. What can the kids learn? Like, can they learn this particular whatever on this website. Great. Awesome. Just holding an iPad and learning how to manipulate the buttons and swiping, those are now life skills. Swiping left, swiping right, swiping up, swiping down, shutting it off, turning it on, clicking, double clicking, triple clicking, dragging and dropping, using a cursor. Those are life skills now. So again, sometimes the tech is great for that. So if there's an app that you are considering using, ask yourself these questions. Is this app great? If it's not great, if it's wrong, look at the reviews. We review everything sideways, you know, Amazon reviews and Better Business reviews and Yelp reviews. Like, look at the reviews. Parents will not hold back when it comes to their kids, right? Again, certain apps are better than others. And so again, some are great. I have to tell you, one thing I did learn on the iPad was the accessibility lock. Do you know that one, Alicia?
I don't think so.
So there's an accessibility lock and you go under settings. I think it's called
Oh, yeah, in the settings. Yes.
yeah. If you triple click that the round square button, it will like lock the screen.
Right.
They can't shut it off, they can't turn it on, they can't do that. And then when you go back to triple click it, you offset it with a code. But like if you are giving them like a kaleidoscope to, you know, a kaleidoscope app where they just touch it and it, you know, pictures show up, and you're teaching them responsiveness and one-on-one, you know, matching and things like that, and they want to click off and go to a different website or different app or whatever, they can't do it. So that was super fun. But although I did have a student like take an iPad and turn it into a rainbow. He was a little mad at that one. I literally turned it into a rainbow. I was like, wow, didn't know you could do that. So that is just a base feature on the iPad. And then how parents can help. Sometimes parents think, oh, well, I'm just going to give them this device and this app and they're going to learn on their own. No, having the parents sit with a child, use an app, be a partner in that learning process is the same thing as reading a book. So again, an app or technology is a whole nother world. I would say keep as analog or old school as long as you possibly can until you get into a more academic environment where they actually need things. I think I did put into the module as well, Snap Type app. So if you have a worksheet, you can literally take a picture of it with the iPad and you could put fillable boxes. Instead of having a child write it, they could type it. So again, for my son, that was very, very helpful. And then Mod Math is another one. It's literally graph paper on an iPad, but it has all the functions, like a calculator with graph paper, and you could line up your words. And it was developed by a family for a kid who had dysgraphia. And you see him at the beginning of the video, all super little and gangly. And then boom, at the end of the video, he's like super older and it's like super cute. And it's like crowdsourced. And yeah, and I mean, so there's so many different tools that are out there. Use what works. Don't overdo it. Yeah. So does anybody have any more questions? We covered a lot of stuff today. Lots of stuff today.
Yeah.
So real quick, is this a high incidence disability or a low incidence disability? High incidence or low incidence? You can put it in the chat. Is it common or not common? You guys are so demure for the first time ever.
Wait, is what
Is
common enough?
And a learning disability.
Yeah, the category of LD. Is it high incidence or low incidence?
High incidence.
Very good. It's the most out of all of the IDEA categories. It's the biggest one. Yeah, by far. And we don't see it until it's like mid K1. And so, we're all like,
nature.
yeah, until we get academic, we don't really see it. And so we're all kind of like holding our breath and hoping, you know, if they were struggling in the pre-K environment, maybe that's gonna, like, there's this little swing that maybe they won't be struggling, or maybe they will, or maybe the ones that were in the pre-K environment did so well because it wasn't academic. And then the second academics hit, it's like, oh, struggle. So, and what we didn't talk about is, or maybe you did when I was gone, the comorbidity, how it shows up with other disabilities.
I talked about how it can morph, like it's not just isolated by one. Yes.
Yeah, or it could show up kids with ADHD.
Oh, we did not talk about that. No.
Yeah, so kids with autism can have a learning disability. Kids with ADHD can have a learning. Kids with seizure disorder can have a learning. Kids with speech and language issues can have a learning disability.
I actually have a question for you. So when we're looking at the prevalence rate, would those be categorized under the autism, or would they be categorized under the LD? Because there wasn't an other.
No, okay, so here's the thing. I learned this one too along the way. So again, my son went from speech and language to OHI, and he was that hyperlexic. He was a hyperverbal kid. So it wasn't like he needed speech and language anymore. He needed for pragmatics. But when it comes, he does have a specific learning disability. He's not even categorized with that. His dysgraphia is not even on his IEP.
Okay, yeah. So then that's a totally, okay. So those numbers aren't even
Not even accurate. So
Yeah.
what she's saying is, so in the numbers that we see of students who have this disability, there's 10, 20, 30% more.
Yeah, there has to be.
So I wasn't identified in public school until college.
Right.
So I would have been one of those kids who I was in GATE, but also had a learning disability. But it was like, mild and weird. So it's one of those things, like, it was never, ever, ever, ever identified. So, and I can tell you, if I look back at that, I kind of would like the same kids I was in GATE with, like in third grade. I'm still friends with a lot of them. It's kind of weird. We just talked about it this last week, and we're like, oh yeah, if autism was a bigger thing when we were in school, X, Y, and Z would have been it, right? Like, we just called it like, oh, that guy's weird and smart. That girl's quirky, right? Or that girl's an airhead, and we'll talk about ADHD later. Yeah, right. Oh, she's ditzy, right? We have all these like weird like these casual languages about it, but now we're seeing these categorical things. Again, it's not a problem until it causes a problem. Be checked out and be whatever. But if you're making ends meet and you're following along, you're not going to get identified. Right. So to answer your question, Professor Fernandez, you on your IEP, you tackle the greatest challenge first.
Right. I was going to say, that's like saying, like a child can have a sensory dysfunction and not autistic, but a child with autism does have a sensory dysfunction. So
right. That is exactly right. So for example, my son is categorized with number 1 is autism. Number 2 is OHI for the ADHD, because remember, OHI is kind of like catch-all. There's no category just for ADHD, so OHI. And in OHI, they sort of treat the LD in there, but there could be a third category for LD. He has it for, well, maybe not right now. He had emotional and behavior disorders as third, but then they would have put LD as fourth. But you know what? Since the autism is such a big deal and the ADHD is so severe, they're kind of like, the rest of the stuff is, we'll tack it all in there. They kind of just, having more categories doesn't mean better or worse. It doesn't mean more or less expensive. It just means more services, right? But he was already in speech and language. He doesn't need the OT or the PT for the holding the, his large muscle groups are fine. His small muscle groups are fine. It's just getting them coordinated and sitting still. Right. So that's typically ADHD plus speech and language, plus the autism, the social emotional. So it's like, basically, if there's 4 things on the table, but they can be handled by just 2 categories or maybe 3. Right. I think that EBD is still on there because he gets an extra 30 minutes of therapy every week, which that was hard for me to be like, okay, and we'll talk about that in chapter 8. But I was like, oh, EBD, he's not emotionally behaviorally disturbed. He has autism and sensory processing disorder, and he's reacting to the environment. My attorney just goes, he's going to get extra therapy, so just let it ride. And I just shut my mouth, because the bottom line is, will it help the child to get an extra category, to get extra therapy? Yeah. Mom, I can get over the label, because it's not a label. I went back to his doctor and said, hey, what do you think about EBD, emotionally behavioral disorder? She goes, I don't think about it because it's not a medical thing. It's like, good point. You're right. Thank you for reminding me this stuff I already know. So categorically can cover all the bases, but LD, unless it's kind of one of the first 2 primary, you're going to get missed. It's got to be big, and kids got to advocate it, and their grades really have to suffer. My grades never suffered. So of course I would never be identified. I pushed hard. I was a very anxious, weird child. I pushed really, really hard. So yeah, I do sympathize with a lot of kids who just don't know how to say it. What about the kids who are language marginalized or culturally marginalized, who don't want to say, hey, I feel really weird about being in this country new, or not knowing the language, not having any friends, and X, Y, and Z, and I have a learning disability. No, I haven't met one student who's willing to stand up for themselves and point out something extra challenging. They'll hide it way more than they'll be open about it. But it's our job to like make it okay and bridge that gap and say like, hey, let's just get some extra help. You want to spend some extra time with Miss Sarah? You know, she's a speech teacher. She's really fun. That's it. That's all you have to do. That's all you have to do. Okay, so questions on LD. What are you guys thinking about it? Let me do this instead of saying like, what are your questions? When we were talking during the chapter, either myself or Professor Fernandez, who came to your mind? In your family, in your friend bubble, or you?
Myself.
Oh,
See,
yeah.
as we go through this, these are real people. This is you. This is me. This is real people. Yeah. And you're like, oh God, I was there. Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. I was one of those has potential, but like they don't know why I'm not doing it. Like definitely learned helplessness,
Huh?
you know, and then eventually, especially when I got to high school, I was like, well, there's no point. I'm going to get, you know, told that I'm not good enough anyway. So why even bother?
Right.
Like, and then it was so hard to come back to college. Like I
It's-
had like 5 gap years and
Yeah. And it's weird though, because our self-esteem really is built at a young age, very like young, like 7. But at the
yeah.
same time, it gets reinforced by peer support or non-support. And then in high school, you're trying to figure out yourself and who I am and what I stand for and what I'm good at, what I'm not good at. And then you start to like believe other people. And then later, like in your 20s, you're like, why did I believe that person? They could have been right then, but they're not right now. And so you get to make your own path, which is super awesome. That's why I loved like adulting. I remember when I was a kid and they would ask, what's it gonna be like in the year 2000? I was like, bro, I'm gonna be 28 and dead. Like, what are you asking me for? Like, I knew I wanted to be an adult, but I could not see past that. I was like, what? I was like 28, jeez. So again, LD is everywhere. And you know what? Every brain is different. So I'm hoping through, you know, people learning through this class and, you know, learning about yourselves. I was trying to explain to one of our other professors about TikTok and how people are really like open on TikTok. I mean, I took it off my phone because I can lose hours on that thing. Right? I have hours to lose on that thing. So I tell myself after grades are posted in December, I can load it. Right. It's fun. Or I'll get some TikTok on Insta and I'm like, that's good enough for now. But people are really open about their symptoms, their trauma, their isolation they felt through COVID, how their learning disabilities got bigger or what they learned about themselves. There's people who are like, there's one guy that I followed, he's like an army vet. And he was like, oh yeah, I'm super ADHD, which is so great for the army. And then I got injured, and which has been super great to sit home and do nothing. And so people are like, I think TikTok's a little bit more like real, or at least the stuff I follow is, where Insta is kind of like this pretty picture of like whatever. And so I like how social media is kind of like becoming a little bit more authentic. And I'm hoping that as we learn about ourselves, we can then, you know, have that empathy and grace for ourselves and then empathy and grace for others, especially little kids. Can you imagine being in 3rd grade right now, or kinder or pre, wearing a mask every day and trying to learn language and social referencing and facial recognition? I just, my heart breaks. I couldn't imagine being a little kid right now. Like I think some of them are kind of clueless because developmentally that's okay. And some of them are starting to click in that doesn't feel good. It's not right. I don't have friends and I want to do more things and we can't go here and we can't do that. It's hard. We're going to see some trickle effects and not good ones for a long, long time. So whatever we can do to be more accepting and open and inclusive and make things positive and eager at this stage is going to help all of us in the long run. Yeah. So cool. Okay, great. 8:30. Thanks for hanging in there. You guys are amazing.
Thank you guys so much. To see you next week.
Really do love our time. Do you guys have any other questions I want to answer before we go? No. Okay, so I'm gonna stop the recording. Oh wait, stop the recording, and then